Hi, I'm Diana Farca and I invite you to walk in tandem. Today's guests are Radu Pinianu and Irina Repede. They are actually amazing and I'm very happy because they took the chance to talk to me. Radu was born in Iași. He grew up in Piatra Neamț and at 15 years old, if I'm not mistaken, he emigrated in Canada with his parents, where he studied engineering at McGill University. And he then started like backpacking his life with the bike, with the skis, with canoeing. And I think I met him in his journey in South Americas. And Irina came along. I think it's his first journey with Irina, New Zealand now and Australia, if I'm not mistaken. But I'm gonna let them talk to you about their endeavors a bit more. Hello.
Hello.
Hi. I will let Irina start with the presentation of us and what we're doing and what we're passionate about. And because I think she can give us she can give a bit of a perspective um, on the whole thing.
Thank you, Irina.
So I met Radu 3 years ago, or actually longer, 5 years ago.
About 4 years ago, I think, when I was in Ecuador.
4 years ago online, and
No,
then
almost 5 years, yeah.
5 years ago online.
Of the Americas from top to bottom, journey of self-discovery. And I started off as wanting to be the first Romanian to cycle the Pan American Highway, but then my journey evolved into something a bit more complex. I just got taken away by curiosity, by this adrenaline of the unknown. And I just kept riding my bike for 3 years instead of 9 months that I planned at the very beginning of it all. And then right after I got to Ushuaia, 3 years after I first, after I started cycling from the top of Alaska, I went back to Romania, and that's where we met. And basically,
We started
been in a
traveling a little
relationship.
bit. It was small journeys, small vacations here and there. And then in 2018, you decided to open a tourism company?
No, that was in 2020.
2020, okay.
Yeah, basically went into, well, I wanted to start making a living out of my curiosity and out of my passion for adventure. And I decided that I will be taking friends and clients along on some planned journeys. And one of these first trips that I did it with Paul Kalin from Wild Think. He has a small agency, adventure traveling agency in Bucharest called Wild Thing. By the way, Paul Kalin is also from Timișoara. And we organized this first tour together. We planned it about 6 months ahead. And for a reason or another, it coincided with the start of the pandemic. So we were among the last to make it into New Zealand without any restrictions. And by the time we were about to leave New Zealand at the end of the tour, borders were already closing, flights got canceled, and whereas everybody else in our group decided to leave because they either had families or jobs and responsibilities back home, we decided to stay. We didn't really have anything to go back to.
It wasn't an easy decision. Like, I remember that time we were stressed. Like, especially me, I was stressed.
Yeah.
On one part, like, we were happy to stay, but we imagined we're gonna stay like 2 more weeks somewhere. So we just thought it's gonna be longer, just a short period of time. We didn't know that it's gonna take so long. So we're like, okay, 1 month, it should be fine. We're just going to stay here a little bit. We're going to explore more. So that's actually a good decision. But then we saw that the pandemic grows stronger and everything is closing down. Then we started to stress out and question if we should stay or not, or if we should go home. But then we said, okay, we're just going to stay and then we'll see what happens.
I think the reason number one that gave us confidence to stay in New Zealand is that at the end of first lockdown, among many that came in the next 2 years or so, we found ourselves in a country that was pretty much COVID free. In start with what was going on in Europe and the rest of the world at that time, right? So I think that realize that, hey, you know, for the better or for the worse, we were in one of the best countries in the world to be in that time. And looking back at it, that was a wise decision, because for the next year or so, we lived pretty much COVID-free without any restrictions, without any, you know, without having to wear masks and being in pretty much a closed-in country, because the external borders, they never opened up until this day. We realized that we're in one of the best places in the world to be in. And what happened slowly after we emerged from that first lengthy lockdown that we went through was to basically do some volunteering. And you know, we're trying to find ways to live cheaply, because rent in New Zealand and in Australia, it's pretty expensive. And we embarked on a HelpX experience where we lived and worked and helped out some locals in Northland, in the north part of the North Island of New Zealand. And through that experience, we found out about a trail that goes across New Zealand. And like, hey, that's a great way of seeing New Zealand properly. If we got stuck here, why wouldn't we transform this friendly, critical situation where we found ourselves in the middle of a pandemic all of a sudden, you know,
I would say here that
into a new adventure, basically.
I would say that New Zealand, it's very adventurous. Like, people in New Zealand, they're very adventurous. So they have this culture of going out in nature and walking, camping, as they call it. So us deciding to do that was actually something pretty natural, to be there and do that at that time. Like, if you would have that you would be in this situation in another country, I don't think it would have been so natural to start such a lengthy project, you know?
Yeah.
So it was very natural.
I had the impression that you had like 3,000 euros or 3,500.
Yeah, no, we had some money when we began the journey, because I organized the tour. Irina, she works in the marketing department for her parents' business, so she, you know, we had some funds. It's very different from when I began the Americas trip, which I truly did with almost no money in my pockets. I started riding the Americas with 900 Canadian dollars in my pocket, which was definitely not enough for such a lengthy project. And then as I went along, people helped me out with different donations. A lot of the people I met along the way, you know, hosted me or even invited me for food in, and so on and so forth. And that exactly the same thing happened throughout our journey in New Zealand.
Yeah, we found ourselves with some people, some amazing people. They even have this Facebook group called Trail Angels. So they are people which they are based around the trail that we were going to walk. So you just say, before starting the trail, you just send them a message like, look, I'm going to do that in that periods. And they started writing to us like, look, I'm based there. When you pass through here, just pop in, I'll give you some food, you can wash your clothes, I can come and pick your luggages with the car so you can walk, I don't know, 20 k's without the backpack. So that was a big help. So we actually had a lot of support in New
Yeah,
Zealand.
in New Zealand, yeah,
A
yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
support.
And the thing is that for the next 4 months, we basically walked and canoed the whole length of the North Island, about 1,700 kilometers. And then moving on to the South Island of New Zealand, she didn't want to walk any longer. And she was like, yeah, maybe it's easier if we bike. So we always have this problem of, like, getting things,
Middle
balancing
way.
out the needs and the possibilities of each one of us. That's the hardest thing that I go through after spending so many years doing those things alone. Then for me, it's sometimes hard to understand, oh, why wouldn't we just keep on going? No, because I'm tired, and I would like to switch to the bike, and maybe it's going to be easier because I already did it.
So Radu, first of all, Radu is hardcore. I mean, he's done this in the most hardcore way. And I found, I mean, I was a city girl. If I was walking, I don't know, one like, the Harris, if I was doing that once,
the loop,
the loop, it was like a 5K loop. If I was doing that once a week or once 2 weeks, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm good. Like, I'm good to myself, So I got myself in New Zealand without any experience in this. I found myself with this hardcore guy that he is so used in doing that he doesn't have to think twice. And we have to fight each other for me to put my needs out there. But it was a problem for me to understand what my needs are and how I want to do this adventure. Like, I need to try this, I need to try this to see what I like and what fits me. So it was and doing all that while being on the road, while having all this pressure, this crazy weather, this crazy it was tough on my body. So what's going on? Am I tired? Or and all this mentally
challenging
challenges. It was a lot to take in. So
yeah. So coming back to New Zealand, so a year goes on, a year goes by, flies by basically.
A beautiful year.
We found ourselves, as I said, in one of the few places in the world where COVID wasn't the main problem. Nobody really understood at the time what COVID was in New Zealand, because there weren't basically any cases out there in the community. So everybody, we kind of like eschewed the pandemic for a while. We got by living a pretty normal life in New Zealand for another year and a half. And it was one of the most amazing times. Even though I've been spending so many years now cycling around different parts of the world, I think we had a very interesting and very beautiful connection with New Zealand. And with the amazing nature in New Zealand, we camped a lot. So as I was saying, we walked the length of the North Island, then we cycled the South Island, then we managed to get to Stewart Island, which is a tiny island south of the South Island. And we did that for a year and a bit. And then came the question what to do after New Zealand. Are we staying here? Are we moving on? Are we going back home? Going back home is never really an option. And to be honest, for Irina, either she wasn't, and she isn't so keen on going back home either. So we really found each other in that sense. Like, I've been doing all these adventures for years now. She was pretty new, but given that her first major adventure together with me was in New Zealand, was a very good thing actually, because New Zealand is a very safe country. It is a country that encourages adventure. Everybody's adventurous. Everybody seems to be adventurous in New Zealand. Everybody's into hiking, sailing, whatever, you name it, everybody's active. And everybody's, is seems to have a very active lifestyle in New Zealand, and they really, really appreciate people that go into crazy adventures and traveling and so on and so forth. So I think society there encourages those sort of activities, those sort of lifestyle. So that helped a lot Irina get into it in the end.
And I would say that New Zealand is very safe, animal wise and insects. Like there are not many things that can kill you there.
There aren't any actually.
There are any, yeah. So
what, the Kia parrots, or what, the seals? That'll be the worst of it. The only that ever came close by, the only mammal, it was the sea lion that we found in front of the hut.
okay,
That's it.
so there is no threat whatsoever.
Yeah.
The only threat would be the weather.
The weather would be the threat.
But then there are ways to manage that. So
and
actually,
everybody is a country that informs.
it's a lot of
the information is out there, all the time. People communicate in such a manner that messages get to you.
in such
you gotta know what you gotta know, and everybody's like into informing you about what's what to expect, or what's
Do you
going
have
on.
sudden
They would
changes
take-
of weather?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
it was pretty,
Yeah.
I would say the weather around this area, Oceania, it's pretty rough and very moody.
Yes.
It changes very quickly and it goes to extreme like I've never seen before. And even like a few days ago, I was talking to Radu saying that I miss like Romanian and Europe weather, especially Romania, that we have those, it's quite balanced, you have the very cold weather, you have the very hot weather, and then you have the in between.
Yeah, you have the 4 seasons.
Yeah, and here, I mean, one day it's crazy, and then the other day is very hot. I mean, it's crazy how.
Yeah, like we had floods for the last 2 or 3 days, but before that we're in a heat wave here in Australia where we are at the moment, and that's this this is bringing our conversation closer to where we are right now. So at the end of our New Zealand journey, we're already planning by then to move on to to fly over and spend the next year or 2 years cycling around. Australia is not the same thing as New Zealand. Australia is a continent in the end, and it's a very rough and hostile environment. New Zealand can be hostile, New Zealand can be rough, but not nearly as bad as Australia. And to be honest, even after I've cycled the whole length of the Americas and went through so many things, I still find Australia being very rough and very wild place. But in the end, this is what we're here for, no? Because we wanted to see that. We wanted to see those. At least I wanted from the very beginning when I started my Americas trip. I wanted to explore and to get to see the last remaining wilds of planet Earth. Cycling Alaska, cycling Patagonia, cycling different deserts. Climbing mountains. And all that is not something that you have, it's not something that you can experience in Europe. I love the open spaces, the long distances, and all these, wild parts. And Irina too, I guess, she joined me in this. And even though she has sometimes a hard time dealing with, remoteness, or remote places, I think she does love it in the end.
Yes. Okay, so we came to Australia and we had to add up a lot of other things um, to the path, you know. So I would say we had to add the animal issues here, and there are a lot of them, like a lot of insects, weird insects that they can actually kill you in a second. And the remoteness that Radu was talking about before. So I always had this fear of remoteness, even if on the other side, I really love nature and I really love staying in like very close to nature. And I found the remoteness here to be a bit scary, because the remoteness here means many, but many, like hundreds of kilometers away of anything. So I found it a bit psychologically difficult, because you always ask yourself, I mean, oh my God, if something happens to me, if an insect bites me, or there are snakes around, there are so many snakes around and spiders, I mean, I'm gonna get to a hospital. So sometimes I would get myself in a panic in the middle of the night, saying, oh my goodness. I would look at the sky and I could not be happy, or I could not feel very happy, because in my mind the thought would be, oh my goodness, you are actually here and you are so far away from anything, you know. Or if a snake comes here and bites you, oh my goodness, you're gonna die for sure. So then you have
Do
I
you
have
verbalize when
all
you
these
have the fears with
mixed
Radu or not?
feelings and mixed thoughts. Oh,
Yeah, but I must admit that I'm a bit of a, like, naysayer, like, it's not a big deal, so I think that's an aspect that I should be improving in myself, because I'm very I detach myself very easily from the dangerous situations, or from um the dangers that inevitably come along on such journeys. And this is good, this is bad. But when sometimes Irina complains about it, I try to minimize it, and she gets angry, and she probably has a good reason to get angry. Because as I was saying, it feels to me that I went through so many things in the past, and now I'm working on a documentary about my journey through the Americas. And again, summarizing all the things I went through, I just realized, oh my God, it's been like so many things that happened along the way, and so many characters and so many experiences that make you think on a certain level that this is a normal way of being. This is what other people go through. So your mind gets away from the crowd that lives in a very standardized and routinized way, and a very safe way. So you assume other people have the same um, should behave the same, should allow themselves to have these crazy experiences, and have an easy going about them, which is totally not the case.
It took a lot of fights between us to make him
Still takes.
And it's still
Still
happening.
takes.
For him to become more sensitive or more sensible towards me. But on the other hand, it was a lot of work from my side to understand what the hell is going on with me and with my exterior. And I had to understand if I really love this. And as I understood, I really want to do this. I said in my mind, okay, I have to go through all these panic attacks that I'm having, all these thoughts and emotions. And slowly, I start verbalize it more. At the beginning, I phrased myself, and really talk to you much. But then with fights and me opening up and understanding what I
Yeah,
want,
when she doesn't talk, she's like a bomb, you know, it's gonna explode.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I thought at the beginning, if I speak this out loud, the symptoms would become worse, you know. So I kind of put
Mm-hmm.
myself in a shell and hoping for it to pass and the light of the day should come faster, and I was waiting. um, but then slowly and slowly it got better. It got better. I still have some days where we are remote and I go crazy, or I'm trying to um,
I think she just went
avoid
through
it.
the longest period of, not sleeping in bed.
Yeah.
We just,
Mm-hmm.
well, we just, a month,
What?
it took us, I think, 30 days to cycle the whole length of the Cape York Peninsula from Cairns up to the tip of Australia, which is very close actually to Papua New Guinea. And it's a very remote area of Australia. And we literally slept for 30 days in a row in the tent, So no
How
comfort
much do you
whatsoever.
carry? How much equipment?
Oh, sorry.
How much equipment do you carry? Because you're two now.
Yeah, we carry a
How
lot of
hard is it to
equipment.
carry?
We have quite a bit of equipment, and
Yes.
she's very good
So
at
I'm
buying
guessing.
new new equipment. And sometimes I get so many, it's like, oh my god, you're buying that shit again, or like that shit too,
Because
like.
I always try to bring in comfort to myself and
Yeah, I'm
him.
I'm trying
Mm-hmm.
to make it rough. She's trying to make it comfortable.
I mean,
I'm trying to make it rough.
Yeah.
She's That's how we are.
already what we are doing is very rough, you know. So I'm trying to build a life on the road, you know. So I'm trying to bring a little bit
Mm-hmm.
of comfort, and on
Yeah,
the
that's
other
true.
side, I'm trying to make everything efficient. You know, like I think I have a part in me that sees something, and I'm like,
Yeah, that yeah.
how can I improve that thing? You know. So I always look at. I love equipment, you know. So I always look like, okay, there are many mosquitoes around. What can we do? For sure, there should be a solution. For us to stop these mosquitoes coming into our tent, you know. So I
Yeah, and she finds a device that actually works, and kills the mosquitoes, or
after
don't let them get close to us. Whereas I'm more like, oh, I just let it be, and I just want to experience what's out there, and I accept a lot of pain and a lot of,
yeah,
a lot of shit, literally.
I accept a lot of pain too, but when
Yeah,
it gets too much, and here in Australia it gets too much, like I can, like we stayed in a tent by a river in a, so on our way to
yeah,
Cape York
yeah.
there
We
was a
we
big river there.
slept for about 7 nights. We camped on a river and on in Jardine River, and it was hell because
It
there's
was
so
hell,
many
like you,
mosquitoes.
it
And
was so hot, it was like 38 degrees every single day, but it felt like 40 something in the shade. So we didn't had any place to hide. We were actually under a roof, but there were like there was no air conditioning, there was nothing you can do, you know. So you had to stay with the hot weather. And on the other side there were mosquitoes. Usually in some places there are mosquitoes when the sun rises and when the sun sets, but there, because we were next to a river, there were mosquitoes all the whole day. So when you were out of your tent, like when the sun sets, it was a disaster. Like there were mosquitoes everywhere, and I would get like 40 mosquito bites, like in a
they
half
eat
an
you
hour,
out.
you know. And there were mosquitoes with dengue fever, with many diseases. I'm like, what the hell, you know. So at that time I had to find ways to leave, you know, because, and then I went into the tent, and it was more hot, but it was protecting me from the mosquitoes, but it was a hell. So then after that I was like, Rado, we need to be able to stay outside and cook when the sun sets, and because it gets a bit cooler, we need to stay outside, you know. So we need to find a way to make this work. I cannot live like that, you know. So that's why this is when my mind goes like, okay, I need to find a solution for it to work.
Yeah, so I guess many people don't realize how
Tough is.
tough and rough and wild Australia can be, you know, because when you say Australia, I mean, not a lot of people get to see real Australia. Australia is not about the Sydney Opera House or the Australian Open in Melbourne, you know, it's about, it's probably the second most wild continent on Earth after Antarctica. Antarctica would be the only other continent that would be basically wilder than Australia. But it's a country and it's a continent at the same time, you know, whereas you know the whole of Europe could easily fit into the territory of Australia. Australia only has about 26 million people living here, so that's basically nothing, you know. And most of the population of Australia lives in 5 big cities, and that's it. So over 60% of the whole population lives in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, and Perth. That's it.
Yeah.
And the rest of it, it's some, you know, some towns and some spots that you see as, you know, that or that you might think as being towns on the map of Australia are just like, you know, a family or something like that that lives out there. It's just some places in Australia are out of this world, you know, a lot of ways. It just sometimes it's extraterrestrial. That's what Australia looks like, and the creatures that live here are so ancient and so, you know, out of time, you know. A lot of the lizards, a lot of the guanas, a lot of the reptiles that live here, they're pretty much like dinosaurs, remnants of the dinosaur
Do you,
world, you know.
Irina, you mentioned that you like to bring comfort to your journey and that you don't like that much the remote places. Is there any part of the journey that made you feel afraid, Radu?
Uh, no, not really, not really. I didn't. The only time I was afraid of is when some kids basically came during nighttime to rob us, and I caught them red-handed, to say so, and they didn't manage to steal anything. I think I got pretty good skills after cycling Latin America in what regards thieves and stealing, because I'm always, you know, watchful of my belongings and, you know.
Did you ever get stolen since biking?
Yeah, well, I had a gun pointed at me when I was in French Guiana. I had a pannier stolen at knife point in
Hmm.
Panama. I had thieves coming to look after me in a hotel in Venezuela, and the list can go on, you know. So there were quite a few incidents, and you know, cycling for more than 2 years throughout Latin America, you get used to, you know, people having electric fences around their houses, you know, all the stores you walk in, they have bars, you know, and everyone is aware of, you know, thieves and this kind of things around Latin America. I was surprised when I finished my Americas trip and I went back to Romania on how, um, for example, rich people having big houses in the outskirts of Bucharest don't have electric fences. I was surprised. I was like, oh, so you can just jump over this fence and go and steal from them? That wouldn't be possible in Latin America. So I think you become a lot more aware of these things as you travel across South and Central America, because it's a reality. It's a very uh, it's paradoxical in a way, it's paradoxical in a way because everyone seems to be so open and so kind and so nice to you, but on the other there's all these you know all this stealing and robberies and um, crime, happening throughout pretty much all the countries of Latin America. So the crime is very high and very much present everywhere you go in uh, Latin America. And so I'm used to crazy things, and I'm used to a lot of austerity, roughness, and I don't think I can say that Australia has something that I'm afraid of. No, but on the other hand, there are some things that are a lot more extreme than anything I've seen before, like the heat. Probably the only other place I cycled through such crazy temperatures and humidity would be the north part of Argentina and Paraguay that I cycled around the same time of the year, around 4 years ago. Um, I was cycling the northern provinces of Salta and Formosa in Argentina, and it was so damn hot um, that I ended up, in the hospital in Paraguay with and what do you call this? Heat stroke. And yeah, so I'm kind of used to everything along these lines, but it does feel quite remote and quite rough, being here in Australia and doing the trip the way we're doing it on two tricycles this time. Gotta mention the fact that again, my better half came up with a new idea by the time we reached Australia, saying like, "Hey, I know you want to do it on a bike, but I just hate the bike. All right, how can we do that?" So she sometimes we just crash for a month or two, and we need to sleep. So during that months that we had to recover ourselves from the whole New Zealand journey, we found a place in Akaroa in the Banks Peninsula close to Christchurch where we're helping out the owners of the motel, and in exchange they offered us a free accommodation. So we spent there about 3 months, and that's when she started like googling and researching this possibility of building a solar tricycle.
I saw she has a solar tricycle.
She has a solar tricycle. I mean, probably the next thing would be like a solar flying tricycle or something like that. That would be probably the next upgrade from here onwards. But in one regards, Australia, she decided to build herself a solar tricycle, and she can tell us more about that. Because I was totally, kind of like against it. I was like, oh, a bike is sufficient. I don't need anything else. I've been cycling the world for the past few years. It's all good to me. I can keep on doing it the same way I've been doing it for the last few years.
Okay, so I like walking. Like I really walk. I really walk a lot. So I love it.
Up until a point, when she gets real bored from me, then she's like, nah.
But walking Australia was actually not an option because it's so huge and Radu wants to see it all. So there was
that's the problem we have.
It's like 13,000 kilometers. So I thought, okay, there are people doing this, but I thought it's not going to be an option for us. So I was actually looking if we should, because another wish of mine is to walk alongside an animal like a horse or a donkey or a camel. So at first I wanted to do that, but again, doing doing the journey we want to do, so cycle across around Australia, even that with an animal would have been a bit difficult. So then when we cycled South Island, like a normal push bike, I understood that I don't like cycling. Like it's very uncomfortable for
Not
me.
in the traditional way, let's say.
Yes, I mean, it was like the South Island of New Zealand was hardcore. Like you have big climbs and big days of climbing. And me, I think the muscles in my body were not prepared for this. Like I didn't had the I never cycled before meeting Radu. Like I knew how to cycle, but I would go to the gym and I would do that for an hour once here and there, and that was it. So I understood in New Zealand that I I don't love it that much. So I had to find the between way between walking and cycling. So I came up to this idea of having a electric tricycle, and then um
No, sorry. I just gotta change
Your
position.
position.
Yeah.
so I knew that I wanted something electric because we have long stretches in a very hot area. So I was like, I need something to help me out. Otherwise, I'm not going to enjoy it fully. So I was like, I have to do it solar because I cannot go and plug my tricycle, my electrical tricycle anywhere. It's going to be very difficult to find the plug. So we're like, okay, we're just going to put solar panels on top. We have to make this work. So we did it actually. It was quite difficult to put it all together because we were in Cairns, that it's quite a remote part of Australia. So it was very difficult to find a specialist that could help me out to put everything together. And then was very difficult to find.
Very expensive. Australia is damn expensive.
So all along this way, I had many doubts if that's the correct way to do. And Radu was getting frustrated and annoyed at me. It's like, oh, what the hell are you doing? This takes too long. This takes so much money. This is not going to work. We don't know if it's going to work, and then I start having doubts, because it can break in the middle of nowhere and I have no engineering degree. And I don't know anything about solar and, like electric tricycles, what I'm going to do. And slowly we learned a lot about it. And yeah,
basically it took us around 3 months to put everything together, and then we started cycling northwards towards the Cape York, the northernmost point of Australia. And we had a lot of problems in the first 2 weeks of our trip. God damn it, my rear hub broke, had to change my wheel with it. It was a brand new tricycle and it still broke. First big climbs were just killers. Like we took an off-road track. Oh my God, it was one of the most difficult tracks because there is in Australia wide, because they have some climbs that go like 30 degrees, and the incline of the slope is about 32, 33. That's a lot, and it's off-road. So our bikes broke on those slopes. Irina's bike basically didn't break, her chain snapped, and that was easily fixed. But my rear hub, the hub that is on the rear wheel, broke, and there was nothing else that I could do other than getting a new wheel, getting a new one, because it couldn't be fixed, and so on and so forth. But once we fixed those, our journey towards Cape York kind of like became smoother. We got used to it. We got used to riding these tricycles, recumbent tricycles. And we found out that in the end, the design that Irina built was working, excepting those few problems that we had at the beginning. It worked, and with the sun that we get here in Australia, I think it's a pretty great design because she doesn't have to worry much about charging the battery. It can last for the whole day, and she can go over 100 k's easily on that bike every
Now
day.
I'm the one that turns around and Radu, move faster. I have to wait for you. And he's
Yeah,
like, oh
because
my
I
God.
didn't want to get mine electric. I still wanted to keep it in the old fashioned way. Just using my uh muscle power.
So she's
Yeah.
cheating a
Yeah.
bit with the electrical.
Yeah.
Yeah, some people that we meet along the way, they're like, "Oh, how does that work?" Yeah, I got a motor. It's like, "Oh, you're cheating."
Yeah, I get that a lot, but I love it.
No, I'm joking. I'm
Yeah.
sure you love it because it's more.
Yeah.
Have you ever considered giving up, Irina, on those
Oh,
different parts of the
She
every
yeah?
does.
day.
She does. But fortunately or unfortunately, she's got me, and I'm so stubborn to finish everything we start. I'm like, no, we gotta do that. We gotta do it. I really want to do it. It's
She's
just
annoying.
So
I'm
this kind
like,
of
let's
shifts.
go for it. Let's do it. Like,
I
and then there's small things I have to give up here and there to concede some aspects, and then I kind of know it by now where I have to, or where I am allowed to be stubborn and go all the way, and where I'm not. And we're still having quite a bit of uh, fighting when it comes to doing extra things, because I have this way of dealing with whatever I see on the way. Getting as we ride, um, as we go along the way, I always come up with new ideas. In that, I see a mountain here, an island there, and I'm like, oh my God, it would be cool to go there. And I'm like, and then within 30 minutes, I'm actually getting serious about getting there, and doing it. And just like, no, not again, man. Let's just keep rolling, Forget about that island. And then I get real stubborn. It's like, no, I really want to do it, Before meeting you, I was able to just turn left and go for it. Now we have to actually balance everything. And yeah, and I have this I really have this problem of like getting ideas as I go along, and then trying to actually get serious about them and materializing them. And trust me, I get a lot of ideas. I got every day I get a new idea. It's
So
like
she
it's
can.
also like a way of like maybe collecting places and experiences. And I know that the more I do, the more I get motivated to do and I also feel that I want to be authentic in a way. I always think that that island is very interesting to explore. Not a lot of people go there, so I would love to go there. I'm not keen on going to very well-known places. I'm always exciting to get to like very, very hard to get to places, and very remote places. And in the end, it is actually very expensive to go to remote places. That's the most expensive type of, you know, adventure or tourism that you can do. It's not a lot of people that you'll see going up to Cape York. It takes a certain type of person to do those things, but it's not something cheap. It's the most expensive. It's more expensive to go, I don't know, to some remote islands of Australia like Macquarie or Tasmania, or well, Tasmania is not a remote island, but I'm just giving an example. Or I don't know, Antarctica, than it is to go and party a whole week in the most expensive and luxurious hotel in Ibiza. I'm just giving you an example. It's
Yeah,
not
understood.
something cheap that you do. That's a lot more expensive than what you might consider a luxurious trip that most people would dream to take.
You like to explore the food, the local food or not?
Yes, yes, I do. I do. I'm not, that's not my primary thing, but and I'm not looking to involve myself into directly into food trips, but
Mm-hmm.
it's something that definitely sparks up my appetite, my, you know, my, it makes me happy when that happens in a context where I travel to a country, where I go through a land, and then I meet locals that invite me to taste from the local food, you know. In that way, it really makes me happy and I fully enjoy it, you know. It's as if, you know, they share something of their culture with me. They share something of themselves with me, you know, that makes them who they are. Or yeah, in that context, I'm really glad to taste all sorts of crazy food, and I'm definitely into it. But I'm not that type of traveler that goes, you know, to places to taste food, or, you know, to, I'm not primarily looking
Mm-hmm.
for that, but it usually comes to me as a result of what I'm doing anyways, because, you know, traveling for years on a bike, it's, you know, meeting locals, it's something that happens every day. It's, you don't have to look very hard for this type of experience. It comes as a result of what I'm doing, and I fully enjoy it. I love tasting different foods and from different cultures around the world, and that is part of what I'm doing, most definitely. Not in Australia though. Not in
Why?
Australia. Australia doesn't have a lot of you know, genuine Australian food, because you know, some people might ask themselves why, and it's not something very easy and very comfortable to answer to, because it has to do a lot with the colonization of Australia
Mm-hmm.
and construction of Aboriginal life and Aboriginal culture in this country. Basically, when the British came and colonized Australia, they took everything away from the Aborigines and they introduced everything that was foreign to this land as being, you know, the main source of food. Like they introduced the same type of wheat and the
Mm-hmm.
same type of grains and potatoes that we're very familiar with in Europe, but the Aborigines actually had their own type of grains grown and developed here in Australia throughout many thousands of years. And they had their own potatoes. They had basically their own cuisine, but that cuisine has been long forgotten and long abandoned since British rule in Australia. And nowadays, of course, there is not a lot of diversity of foods in Australia, other than the fact that immigrant communities like the Thai, the, you know, the South Asian, the Indian communities brought along them their own cuisine, which of course it's something very um, very good at, and something that we are enjoying whenever we're in a larger town or city in Australia. But other than that, there's not a lot of types of food in Australia. Probably the most common one is fish and chips. There's a lot of good fish here on the east coast of Australia, and it's not very expensive. It's very accessible. We love the coral trout. We're close to the Great Barrier Reef here, and there's a lot of variety of fish, and it's very, very good. But yeah, as I was saying, Australia, you always, as you travel this land, you can see and feel this lack of, uh, oh, on the one hand, there's a lot of Aborigines culture left, and on the other, there's a lot of denial and there's a lot of racism and there's a lot of the same bullshit discourse that that this land has been experiencing since the British colonization.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like Australia is such a profound different land from anything I've seen and experienced before. It's sometimes, being in the outback or in the remote areas, it feels like this land is basically out of time. It's eternal. That's the feeling you get there. Nothing else matters. It's just, a piece of something in the middle of nowhere. Um, and you can kind of see the trauma that at least white people seem to have in this country, and of course the Aborigines as well. Um, but the Aborigines are very, very much connected with this land. Um, they developed a culture that is, 40 or 60,000 years old, and you walk the land, you cycle the land, you meet those people, and you see they very much belong here. That's very much their land, their culture, their tradition. Whereas we get this feeling that white people in this country,
Or visiting.
the colonizer, let's say, the white Australians are totally, but totally different from the Aborigines. There's nothing in common. There's nothing that links one to the other. It's two cultures that are completely detached from one another. And we were surprised to find out a lot of, we feel that there's a lot of violence in this country, aggressiveness. Even as we're cycling, we feel that drivers passing us are very aggressive. And we don't feel that these people have much in common with the land they
Mm-hmm.
live in. I think that's very personal, what I'm saying, and that's very subjective, but that's what comes to my mind and my heart when I talk about the land we are exploring together at this moment in time.
What did you most learn about relationships from exploring together, or your relationship? Because for Irina, I understood she learned
I
how to talk about her needs.
Oh, it's
Yeah, what did I learn? I'm still in the process of it, it's not something
it's
that
always
it's
gonna be a process.
um
There's no end
it's
in
like
this.
maybe, sometimes because I'm such a, it's sort of like a marathon where you have a need to keep going, to keep doing it over and over
Mm-hmm.
and over. And it also feels like a drug. Like, you start by cycling on a normal road, and you might go to some, not so remote areas, and but then your mentality as an explorer evolves in that, you realize, but I'm not doing anything special following a sealed road. I want to go and do, pulling a cart and seeing the most remote dunes of the Simpson Desert, which is somewhere now, very, very, very few people do or go for, and or I'm like, yeah, like this island is very touristic, people go there for vacation. I don't want to do that. I want to go into very remote and uninhabited island and trek for a few days. Or I dream about going to Antarctica and spending a whole month, pulling again a sled and going for the South Pole, being alone. So I'm very much I'm a very solitary soul being, and I'm a very solitary soul, and a very solitary person. And all those experiences feel like a marathon that I where I I gotta keep going. I gotta keep going. I gotta do crazier things. I gotta do, improve myself in that regard. But on the other, Irina brings the more humane side. Is like, well, why doing all these things? Maybe
Mhm.
it's not about just doing the craziest things and just doing the most remote part, but also bringing joy and bringing a bit of a comfort in your life, and actually getting to have a bit of money, because before getting to meet Irina, I travel with no money. So I get so angry at her sometimes when I know that, oh, but I can do that without money. And she's like, no, you got to have a budget for that. You got to do it in a certain way. You got to bring a bit of a joy in your life and get a hotel room once in a while, not just sleeping in the tent the whole year. And there's these things where I'm trying at this moment to find a bit of an equilibrium, a bit of a balance between the way I live before meeting Irina and Irina's way of seeing and doing these things.
So trying to be independent in a relationship, independent, I mean, on every way, like your own thoughts, your own desires, and your the way you look at the world. So trying to be independent in a relationship where you are non-stop together, sleep together, like, yeah, being non-stop together, it's difficult. But adding to that you are in some situation where you push yourself to the limits, so you're very tired, you didn't eat well for many days, there's so many things around you that come towards myself and towards us. It's been very challenging. But on the other hand, um, so I feel like when we work together towards something, and having all this pressure from outside and being a bit low inside, is being very, very
Yeah,
challenging.
but on the other hand, I feel like it's very nice to wake up and having someone to share all these experiences
Yes,
with.
I
To
know.
wake up next to someone and like say, hey, well, let's have the coffee together this morning and let's enjoy the sun and look and
So we push each other in different ways. Like
yeah.
he pushes me to conquer my fears and go do what I love, and he pushes me behind. And it's like, come on, you do it anyway. So he really pushes me in that sense, and he pushed me into being more open with people and talking more. And so he opened me up a lot. Um, and then I push you in different other
She
areas.
pushes me a lot with the money. You got to earn a living this way. You got to
We
earn
need
a living that
stability.
way. It's like you got to have the money. And I'm always like, no, I lived without the money. So for 3 years, I barely had money to buy a sandwich.
But then I ask a lot about, I ask to have a little bit more structure. So we are working on that. And I think emotionally as well. I push you emotionally
Yeah,
to
because I'm
open up.
very stubborn into my own, I sometimes get stuck into my own world, into my own little bubble, and that's the hardest to get out of.
Yeah, so yeah, pushing each other in, so we kind of complement each other in many ways. So finding that pieces that we put together every day, it's been beautiful and also challenging. Yeah.
Mm.
Did you manage to develop common rituals? Because being all the time together, do you have like a moment which he mentioned where you drink your coffee or do something the same way each day,
We used to have
or
that
any
moment of
ritual that
drinking
you?
the coffee, but she stopped drinking coffee at some point. So I was left alone.
So you see, have your moment. Uh, we are okay, so we both need alone time to function. So if we don't have our alone time for a long period of time, we go crazy. Like I go crazy and I become very confused on what I need and want. So we do sometimes we forget about what we need, and then we struggle for a few weeks and months until we realize, okay, wait, I need my space. I need to go somewhere. I journal a lot. I just have my moments with my friends, so I can feel like I have a different, like
Mhm.
a separate life from this one. So I'm trying to connect a lot to that. And we also had a lot of problems because on our journey we met a lot of people and we were invited to sleep in other houses and be always in contact with other people. I mean, not always when we were remote, we are
I
just us,
remember,
but
she came a long way because
yeah.
the first trip we did together was in Jordan 3 years
Oh my
ago.
goodness.
And so me being used to ask people for hospitality, I thought, that was the normal thing to do, and I contacted some guy on couch surfing in Amman, and we went to his place for a night. And in the morning, because she didn't like, at the time she was so picky, she didn't like the linen on how it smelled, the sheet and the yeah. And
It was very
at
bad.
7:30 in the morning, even before I was just waking up, and I saw her on booking.com actually trying to book a Marriott hotel. So that was it, and that was from the very beginning. And then 2 days at the Marriott, and then we went out and we hitchhiked in front of the Marriott hotel. And I asked for the guys at the reception to hand me a cardboard, and he didn't even
Grasp.
grasp the idea of what I was trying to do, to actually check out of Marriott and then go and hitchhike in front of the hotel.
That was funny.
We had this kind of like
Experiences.
all along. At the end of the Cape York trip, it would have happened in Australia too, but
It's
fortunately or unfortunately, Marriott is
not
it's
happening in
not
this
happening
country.
because it's so expensive that it's it's out of reach for us, for our budget.
No, it can't
Yeah.
happen here.
Nice. Where can people reach you? You have the website, Radu.
Yeah,
Facebook, do
on
people try
Facebook,
to reach you to
Radu
encourage you?
Peltignano
Have
and
you seen?
Irina Repede, and Instagram too.
Do you have
Radu
people
Peltignano,
Romanians that show you
Irina
support?
Repede. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'm gonna put the links. I'm gonna put the links in the clip below. But I was wondering, do you also have like a steady base of people who follow your journeys or that you inspire to go?
Yeah. Well, I had many people after my America's trip coming to me saying that I inspired them to, go out there and adventure themselves into different shorter or longer trips for the matter. And a um, I had a young student from Iași in Romania that was inspired by what I was doing, and then he went and cycled 10,000 kilometers around Romania because he was still under 18. He couldn't leave Romania at the time, but he wanted to cycle 10,000 kilometers. So he basically did it inside of Romania, but it was still quite amazing. So you do inspire quite a bit of people, and I think you don't need much to do so. You need to be very authentic and very true to yourself, regardless of what you're doing. I think I really express a lot of who I am through what I'm doing, through these adventures and through these trips. to these expeditions, whatever you want to call them. Of course, curiosity is something that characterizes me. I'm very, very curious, more intellectually than emotionally curious, but I'm a little bit of both. And yeah.
You are so amazing. I read the story about you initially wanted having the group of tourists that came back, you remaining in New Zealand after the pandemic hit. I read about the platform. I wanted to ask you the name because I think it was Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms. So that's a platform where people can find hosting and jobs, volunteering. So it's like
Woofing.
an online platform, I'm guessing.
So woofing is it's mostly for farms. So
Mm-hmm.
if you want to have this farming experience where you want to
Mm-hmm.
learn about growing your vegetables or any other stuff, so this is woofing, which is you have to be careful because sometimes people can take advantage and ask a lot of hours from you.
But most of the
But
people are
most of the
nice,
people
yeah.
are nice, so you just have to do a little bit of research and do like trial and error. We found some people that were amazing and some people a little bit sketchy. But then there is another platform that we used a lot was called Helpix.
Helpix.
And
The same. I mean, it's the
is the
same. It's
same,
about
but
the same. But woofing is more. You usually find people that need you into agricultural or farming, agricultural work, farming, gardening. Whereas Helpix could be a lot of other activities, even touristic activities or fishing or just
hospitality.
hospitality.
You can even work in a hotel if
Yeah,
you
it's
want
basically
to. So
exchanging a few hours of your time every day in exchange for accommodation and sometimes even food.
yeah.
Yeah, but we found out that once you've been here for a while, you figure out that at least in Australia is not really a fair system in that you could work those hours and get paid by hour, and in the end you make a lot more. But if you want a family sort of experience, and if you want to see what if an Australian family lives like or a Kiwi family lives like,
and you can also gain skills,
yeah.
during this. So I think it's very good for young people that they, I don't know, finish university or high school or uh, college. I mean, college and university for them to travel around and gain the skills they want. So it's a good trial that
Mhm.
it really works. I think it really works.
Guys, I need to actually go back to
Work.
yeah, but I hope it was a nice
It was
well,
a great show. In the ending, only one question left.
yeah.
What would you say would be the thing that you need to make a relationship work? If it's only one. Or
Well,
the most
connection
important?
and well,
It's only
connection.
one.
A lot of connection. Stay connected. That's the one thing. Staying connected, because if you stay connected, then you can understand and you can that keeps an open channel, and that's where information and everything flows in and out. Because without that, I think it's just it's intellectual, it's mental. So, and it's just it might just turn into a very much
A friendship
like
sorts of arrangement.
no, not the friendship. I would say into a you get accustomed to the person.
Mm-hmm. Attachment.
You get very attached to it, but a relationship is where you have to have emotional connection, and that's where energy and information and behavior and everything flows in and
Thank
out.
you very much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree on that.
So thank you very much for your time, and I'm gonna leave the links where people can find you on the internet. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was beautiful.